All right, welcome. Today we're jumping into a really fascinating and honestly pretty complex debate about why some societies seem to thrive while others get, well, stuck. We're going to look at two powerful and very different arguments that try to get to the bottom of this.
Okay, let's just dive right in with this central, really provocative question posed by commentator Douglas Murray. He argues that this one single question kicks off a massive psychological challenge in much of the Muslim world.
So, this leads us right into our first section where we'll unpack the deep internal conflict that's really at the heart of Murray's whole argument. The whole thing really hinges on this one core idea, the concept of the final revelation. The belief here is that the Quran is it, the last and ultimate message from God. This, according to the source, gives its followers a unique status, right? They're the people who have the final truth. And this is where it gets really interesting. Look at this slide. On one side, you have this theological status, this belief that we were told we're the best, that we have the final word. But on the other side, you have the observed reality, seeing other societies surging ahead in certain ways. And according to Murray, that gap, that's where the real problem begins. This clash is a textbook case of what's called cognitive dissonance. It's that deeply uncomfortable feeling you get when you're trying to hold two completely opposite ideas in your head at the same time. We have the ultimate truth, but their societies seem to be working better than ours. Okay, so if that's the diagnosis of the problem, what's the solution? What does Murray see as the secret sauce for success in the West? Well, it all boils down to one absolutely critical ability: self-correction. Now, the argument here is that the founders of Western societies saw these specific freedoms as the absolute bedrock for progress. They believed that without these, nothing else could really grow. And here's the crucial point. These freedoms aren't just nice ideas on paper. They actually create a practical system. Think of it like an error correction engine for a whole society. It allows you to keep your eyes and ears open, to let people disagree, to realize when you're going down the wrong road, and, this is the most important part, to actually change course. Murray uses this really vivid metaphor to describe systems that can't self-correct. He suggests that politicians often see a wall coming. They hear all the warnings, but instead of braking, they just hit the gas. They're unable or just unwilling to change direction. But in contrast, you have this. Systems like markets, as the argument goes, have a built-in survival instinct. When they see a wall, they don't just smash into it. They pivot, they adapt, they move. And this flexibility is presented as the key difference maker. So what happens when that self-correction engine is missing? Well, the argument we're looking at says it leads straight to stagnation. And that stagnation then breeds something else, a culture of resentment and conspiracy. You know, when a society can't unleash its own people's talent, when it can't grow, that creates this deep-seated frustration. And when things aren't working, that frustration makes it really easy to fall for simplistic explanations that blame all the problems on outside forces. And to really drive this point home, the source material brings up a specific and, as you're about to see, a pretty wild anecdote from Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. So you have this random tragic event, a shark attack. The question is, how do you explain it? Do you look for biological or environmental causes? Or do you reach for something else entirely? This was the reported explanation from some local officials. And this quote is used as a prime example of a mindset that looks outward for a villain, for a conspiracy, which prevents any kind of internal reflection or a real analysis of what actually happened. But hold on, because that's only one side of this coin. Another voice in the source material, Tal Oran, comes in and adds a really crucial and challenging layer of nuance to this whole diagnosis. Oran completely shifts the focus. He argues that the problem isn't purely theological, it's deeply historical. The issue, from his perspective, is a long and painful history of colonization that came along with the spread of Islam. He's talking about this process of Arabization, where indigenous non-Arab cultures were forcibly suppressed and replaced. He argues this wasn't a peaceful shift, but a historical trauma that totally reshaped the region. And this slide names just a few of the groups Oran identifies as victims of this process, peoples who he argues lost not just their homes and their freedoms, but their entire cultural identities. So, from this point of view, the stagnation, what the source even calls brain rot. It's not just a product of a mental conflict. It's the result of a deep historical wound that prevents these societies from connecting with their authentic pre-colonial identities and unlocking their true potential.
Which leaves us with two really powerful, deeply connected explanations for the exact same phenomenon. So let's put them side by side. Is the root of the problem internal and psychological, born from a conflict of belief, or is it external and historical, born from a legacy of colonization? One argument looks at the mind, the other looks at the map.
And that brings us to the final big question this explainer leaves us with. Think about it. If the problem is a set of beliefs, can those beliefs be reformed? But if the problem is a history of colonization, can the damage from that ever truly be undone? It's an incredibly complex question, and it connects both of these powerful arguments.